So today we're going to be learning how to do basic Lua programming, your basic bread and butter. These are programming concepts that you're going to be using a lot for developing World of Warcraft add-ons and programming in general if you're doing that in the future. So let me just comment this out. This is the stuff that we're going to be working through today. First little thing that I want to go through is variables. So if you've done programming in the past, you know exactly what a variable is, but I think it's important just to go over quickly. So to create a variable, you give it a name. We're going to call this tree. I don't know. It's going to be a tree. That's what it's going to be called. And then you give it an equal signs so that this variable named tree is equal to a number. So it's going to be equal to the number 10. That's how you create a number variable. It's very simple. To create a string variable, which is it's a word or a phrase, that's what a string is. To create a string variable, you can give it another name, a corn, and then you do these little quotations to indicate that it's going to be a string, and then you give it a word or a phrase that goes in there for your string. So now when we call this the variable acorn, it's going to print out seed, because that's what this variable is actually this is the actual value of the variable. So strings and numbers are pretty simple. Those are your two very basic variables, and you're going to be using them a lot. There's also, rather than just a number, you can have a float. So that is a number with a decimal point. But next are the slightly more complicated data structures. So you have an array, and we're just going to name the variable of this array as array. It just makes it easy. So we have an array that's going to hold in it a list of, we'll do strings. So an array is basically just a list, and it's going to hold, our array is going to hold 3 values. We're going to have it, you know what? We're going to rename this variable. We're going to call it animals, because we're going to have an array of 3 animals. To indicate an array, you do these square brackets. And then for the values inside of it, we're going to do strings, and we're going to add frog. And then to separate values in the array of the list, you put a comma down, and then you can add another value. Dog, crocodile. So this is how we create a list of three animals or 3 strings. You can also, without thinking too much about it, you can also add a number in here, and that works perfectly fine. An array doesn't need to be of the exact same type of value. The next value in the array can be anything, so that doesn't matter. Very simple. That's how you do an array of animals, basically a list, and you can make arrays of tons and tons of different stuff. So next is the sort of the most complicated data structure that you really need to be using, and that is the object. And for this one, we are going to call the variable just object. That's just going to make it simple. So in Lua, the programming language that we're using, objects and arrays are actually called the same thing. They're both called tables, but it works a lot better if you think of them as 2 separate things. You think of an array as a list, and then an object as a collection of data. I'll show you what I mean by that. But it works better just to have them as 2 separate concepts. In most programming language, that's what they are. But to create a table, or to create an object, it's the same thing as creating an array. You use square brackets, and then it's basically like you're creating more variables within this object. So we can create a variable that holds a number, and we just do the same thing that we do up here when we create a variable that holds a number. We just give it a name, and then we put equals, and then the value that we want to put in there. So we're going to put in 20. And then you give it a comma afterwards to show the same thing here as an array, that you're moving on to the next value. So you can see how it's an object is very similar to an array. It's a list of values, but this is assigning new variables within the object rather than just a list. We're going to add a string to this. String? No, you can't just call it that. What kind of object should we have here? You know what? I'm going to rename this object. I'm going to call it car, because it's better to think of an object as a real thing, and then add properties onto it that actually exist. So you can do max speed is now 20. Color is now a string black. And you can do, I kind of want to put an array in here, or you could put another object within an object, but I'm just going to leave it as it is. So we're going to do price 10,000. It's a very cheap car for nowadays. It's a used car. And so that works very simply for creating an object. As you can see, it has many other variables within the object that we can now call afterwards. So to do that, you would want to, we're going to print it out too. So we'll put it in a print. You want to call the car, and then to get the next layer within the object, you put a dot. And then with that dot, we can call either max speed, we can call the color, or we can call the price. So we're going to do all three of those. Max speed, and then we can put a comma down to print something else. And then we do car.color. That's going to give us black. And then we do car.price. We'll just save that up really quick. Go over to the world of Warcraft, reload ourselves, and what we should see, but are not seeing, we should see these values printed out. So 20 black and 10,000. But yep, we're seeing that. It's right here. 20 black, 10,000. So that's how you create an object, and that's how you access the variables that you created within the object. I didn't say how you actually access the variables within an array, and it's very similar to the way that you do it with an object. So we're going to print this out as well. We're going to call animals, and then because we don't have variables that we can call, we need to actually call it by the index within the array. So in Lua, it doesn't start at 0, the index doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. So this object, or this value, frog, is going to be in the first index position. And then dog is going to be in the second index position, and crocodile is in the third. So I actually want to try to print those out backwards. So we're going to do animals, bracket 3 to get the index position 3. That'll print out crocodile, and then we can comma for another print. Animals index 2, animals index 1. And I think you know what that's going to print out. We just need to see it. So it printed out our array backwards, exactly what we wanted: crocodile, dog, frog. So it went from the third index to the second index to the first index. Very, very simple. That is how you access an array. Next, we want to do conditionals. So in programming, you have a lot of times where you want to, you want to use a conditional. So if a number is greater than a certain value, you print out a certain thing. And if a number is lower than a certain value, then you print out a different thing. This is used very, 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 very commonly. So understanding an if statement is essential. We're going to use our values up here to work with our if statement. We're going to say if tree, which is number 10, is less than car dot max speed, which is true, by the way. So all of these conditionals either evaluate to true or false. And depending on that, it's going to go into the conditional. So we write then, and because this is evaluating to true, it's going to run the code that we put in here, in this space right here. We close off our if statement with an end after our then, and we have the conditional up here. So if this is true, we go into the code. If tree is less than car max speed, then we're going to print out tree speed. We're going to print out something goofy. Tree speed less than car speed. Okay. We're just going to leave it at that. We're going to go and see how that prints out. Tree speed less than car speed. That's exactly what we needed. That's exactly what we got, because our tree is less than our max car speed. So this evaluates to true, and then it prints out the code in here. If you need... So another thing about the if statement is that it doesn't just need to, or it can evaluate a true statement, but it can also do something if the statement comes out false. So the way that you do that is you write an else right after your code here, and then that creates a new code block for you to use. So if this condition up here is false, then it's going to go into this else statement. Print, we're just going to print the exact same thing, but change it to greater than car speed. So if our tree is has a greater, if this evaluates to false, so tree is not less than max car speed, then it's going to come down here and it's going to print this out. So it's not going to do that right now. I'm going to show you how even with this else statement, only one block of code in that if statement is going to pop out, and it is tree speed less than car speed, which is the same thing that we got last time. If we wanted to change that, what we would do is we would make either the tree's speed greater than the max speed or less. And that's just going to make our conditional come out false. So we're going to change this to 21 so that our conditional comes out false. and we print the else statement. So our tree speed is 21, our max speed is 20. Let's go over here, reload, and the else statement prints out. So we get tree speed greater than car speed. So conditionals are very important, and that's just a basic way to use them. Okay. Next, I want to do loops and then functions at the end of that. So what is a loop? A loop goes through a block of code a predetermined amount of times. So if you want to print out 10 numbers, then you can make a loop that goes through a print statement 10 times, and it increments as it goes, so it'll print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's do that. So we're going to create the max value that we want for our loop. We're going to give it a variable, max value is going to be 10, just like we said. And then to create a loop, you use the for keyword, and then you give it your increment value. So this is going to be the value that you start at. Sorry, not your increment value, but this is going to be the value that you start at. And that's going to make a little bit more sense in a second. Usually you start at value 1, and then you move up from there. So start at value 1, and then we want to give it the value that we're going to stop at. So that value is going to be our max value, which we created up there. You could also just put 10 right in here, but we're using a variable just to be fancy. You put another comma down, and then this is how much you're going to increment by. So we're going to increment by 1. What this is going to do is we're going to start at value 1. We're going to, every time we go through the loop, add 1 to this number, to the I, to our index. We're going to add 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. All the way up to our max value here, which is 10. So this loop is going to run 10 times. Do. This is just more syntax for our for statement. You put the do after this declaration of the loop, and then this is the code in here that the loop's going to run through 10 times. So all we want to do for this is we want to print out our index. And you'll see that the index actually increments as it goes through the loop. So all we need to do for that is print out I. Very quickly, we're going to go over and we're going to see our magic work its magic. There we go. We got 1 all the way up until 10. That is exactly what we were expecting. Loops are very, very simple. You use them a lot whenever you're just going through things. It's going to be, if you need to go through, let's say, an array, then you use a loop to access every value. And you could run checks on it, say, if frog, you put an if statement in here. You use this for statement to access tables, arrays, objects, and just do general stuff. It's very useful, very often. Okay. The last thing we're going to go through is a function. And functions are used very, very commonly. So to create a function, you're going to use the function keyword, and then you're going to give your function a name. So we're going to call this print 10. And then to make it a function, you put these little brackets right after your function. There's no keyword after that, but you still put the end key at the end of it. So you can see how the code is going to go in here. It's the same as a loop. It's the same as a conditional. Your code goes in it. So what we want to do is we want to basically just copy this loop from up here, and we're going to put it right into our function. Get the indenting proper. So you can see how there's two ends at the end here, but the indentation helps to show what those ends are for. So this end is for the for statement, and this end is for the function. Basically, if we just do this, we have declared a function, but we haven't called the function. And that's the main point of the function, is that you can just declare it, and then later you can use it many, many times in the future. So the way that we do that is we just use the name of the function, and then we put these brackets behind it, and that's going to call the function that we created. It's going to go through all this code in here anytime that we put this down. So we're going to save that, and we should go back to our World of Warcraft, and we'll get the exact same thing that we got last time. Going through, it's looping 1 to 10. Perfect. Now the last thing that I want to do with this is I want to show you how to give your function parameters. So it doesn't always just have to be a basic function that runs the exact same way every single time. You can give this variables, but we call them parameters. So in this, we're going to give it a the value tree up there. And this is just a name that we're going to use within our function. Over here, you know what? We're going to give it max value right up here, so that it's going to be the same thing. And we're going to remove this line that actually tells us that our max value is 10. And then this is going to be whatever variable that we put in here. So we can change how many print numbers. We're going to change it to say print numbers, because now it's not just going to print 10 values, it's going to print as many values as the variable that we put in here. So if we just put in 10 right here, then our max value is going to be 10, and in here, that's where the variable is going to go, 10. The loop is going to go up to 10 times. If we change this to 11, then the loop's going to go up to 11. If we change this to a variable that holds a number, then it's going to go up until that variable that holds that number. So we have this tree variable up here, which isn't named very well, but it holds the value 21, and it's going to go into our function, and it's going to become our max value. So we're just going to save that and print it out. See how it works. So it works perfectly. We go from 1 all the way up to 21. And basically that's just how you put a parameter into a function. You're going to be doing that very, very often for lots of different things. It's hard to really describe exactly what you're going to use this for, because there's so many different things that you can use it for. I think the last thing that I want to go over here is scope. So let's say that we have our function here. Let's just uncomment it again. And within here, the same way that we had it before, where we had max value up here, we'll remove this parameter so that it's looking at this value, 10, and then it doesn't take a variable anymore, so we remove it from down there as well. This is back to the basic function that we had before. This in here, this max value, isn't going to be accessible anywhere outside of this function because it's created within the function scope. So you're going to hear about scope a lot, and basically all that means is that if you create a variable within some indentation, it's not going to be available on a higher level of indentation than that. Your programming is always going to use indentation for this kind of stuff to show the scope, so it's always going to be very easy to understand. Basically, we're not going to be able to print out max value. If we go down here and we try to do that, then we go over to the World of Warcraft and reload it. What you're going to see, what you should see, is an error, but actually it just prints out nil rather than an error. So that's kind of nice, but you can see that it doesn't do anything because it doesn't know what max value is because it's not in the proper scope. So that's very simple. Very, very simple programming concepts. I hope that if you're not a programmer, this is giving you a little bit that you're going to be able to use, and it's very concise. You're going to be able to come back to this video in the future if you ever need to and learn these programming concepts, because these are the core key fundamentals to programming. So, as always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, follow me, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully there's going to be a couple more videos in this series. Next, I think we're going to be going over the ACE GUI library. So it's going to be pretty fun. I'll see you guys next time.